Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion. I'm Marcy.
And I'm Dee.
We are finding healing after leaving a cult.
We will be discussing abuse and personal experience with the ATI, IBLP, and fundamental churches.
Trigger warning. This podcast may contain descriptions of various forms of abuse. Please take care for your safety and well-being while you are listening.
If the content becomes too much for you to handle, please turn this off. We hope to expose harmful teachings that lead to and justify abuse,
with the hope that those that are experiencing abuse can find support and escape from it.
Welcome back to Umbrella Rebellion, diving into IBLP's Men's Manual. Last video, the question that we addressed about the homeschooling, go check out the last video that I posted if you're not sure what I'm talking about. I had talked about the way he set up that question was part of the grift. So I was like, well, wait, when was this Men's Manual published initially, right? Had he already been thinking about the whole homeschool curriculum at that point, or did this prompt him possibly to go, oh, well, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to talk about this, I should do homeschooling. So, in my opinion, when I looked at the copyright information, it was first published in 1979. Now, ATI became a homeschool curriculum in 1984 from what I can find online and from talking to other people. That seems to track with about the time that people would have been entering ATI for the first year. As publications go, you know that it can take a very long time for some of these things to come to fruition. Wisdom booklets in and of themselves, I believe, kind of expanded from the initial thing that they did and kind of grew and got more in detail and everything. But from what I can find online, it appears that this could absolutely have been part of the grift and the setup to use his homeschool program, or that it was an idea in his head, at least at the time. With that being said, we are going to go to the next question. From what I'm gathering, this is a weekly type of thing. You see there, it says 17th week. He likes to break things down into a routine or a schedule. A lot of his products are broken down by do this every day, do this every week, do this every month, do this every year. Definitely part of his whole program. If you haven't seen the other video, we have a question here. How can I understand what is really happening in the complex world? And then he has these questions that you go through. It's your exercise for implementing and getting the answers that are supposedly biblical and correct. The second question is, a strong nation is built on strong local communities. True, false? If false, can you explain? So his answer, false. A strong nation is built on strong families. When the community is emphasized rather than the family, the social problems that develop are beyond the power of a democracy to solve. The democracy must then become a dictatorship. Families then lose their freedom to worship God because the dictator becomes the new God. Let's focus on family versus community. And it's setting up isolationism, right? That whole answer is saying you as a family need to be isolated from the problems of your community. Does that seem biblical to you? So for me, that seems like not what the focus of Jesus's message was. And all of the Israelites operated as a community. So I'm really curious how he came about the thought process that isolating your family and only dealing with your family problems was biblical. Anybody have any ideas? Because that seems to contradict the Bible in my opinion. Here's the other thing, it's a scare tactic, right? Like, if you don't do this, we are going to be in a dictatorship. I'm trying to keep these short and quick and straight to the point, under 5 minutes. I would like to know what your thoughts are on this next question and how he answers it. The reason I say that this podcast and Marcy and I stay away from politics is because there are so many people that are just now finding recovery from these cults. They're just now starting to deconstruct And we don't want anyone to feel like they are being judged for where they are at in their journey. It takes a really long time to come out of these thought patterns. And our focus is on helping people get from point A to point B and feeling loved and accepted in the meantime. Our page is about inclusion and love, no matter where you stand at this point, and gaining knowledge to be a better person in the end, right? Like, knowledge is power, and we really, really feel that way. But we also don't want to prevent someone from finding healing by being political and very boisterous about how we feel politically. This is possibly going to open a can of worms in the comments. I would just say that if you're going to comment about politics, I just ask that you be respectful, and we won't be attacking anyone in the comments if they have a difference of opinion. So let me know in the comments, do you think that this is setting up isolationism? Do you think that this is a fear tactic? Your government is going to be a dictatorship if you care about your community? Do you feel like it's the Christian worldview to only handle your family problems and not work as a community to better your community where you live? Like, I'm curious what y'all think about this, because I was not expecting that answer based on being in the cult, but I should have, because they talked about insulation, not isolation. But what they did was isolation. So you can call it what you want, but in the end, it is what it is, right? If you are new to us, please consider following us, subscribing to us, sharing us out. Also, in case TikTok does go away, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Substack. I'm really focusing on Substack and TikTok and YouTube primarily. If I have the time and energy to add things other places, then I do that. But those are the three main apps that I will be working on and working out of. So with that, let's get to the next question. As I said, Buell Gothard has broken up these questions in the men's manual. From what I'm gathering from the little bit that I've looked at this thing, it's basically how to be a man. He's trying to teach men how to be men in a supposed godly and Christian way. So we have the initial question is, how can I understand what is really happening in this complex world? Because obviously you're an adult and you don't know how to view things correctly because you were raised in some other religion, or you were in school and they, teach humanism, basically, is what he's saying. So, all right, we're at question number 3 on the have you been deceived? The question is, a child's personality cannot be changed after 7. True, false? If false, can you explain? Let's see what Bill Gothard has to say. 3. False. The learned behavior patterns of a person which did not conform to the character of Christ can be changed at any age. So, from the research that I have done as a parent, there are certain things that get developed in the very primary years of your life. A lot of personality is set, from what I've read in my own readings, around the age of 5 to 7, right? Like, scientifically research stuff from what I have seen. Does that mean that you can't change? I believe that people can change, right? Brains develop, brains grow. The frontal lobe development that helps us have reasoning skills, right? Like, we don't have reasoning skills prior to a certain age, and I don't know what age that is. And then when our frontal lobe fully forms, then we have more ability for reason and understanding things in the world. Although I might agree with him in a way, it seems like it's setting up that you can program your kid to believe in Jesus, and it's not too late, even if you didn't believe in Jesus before. Does that make sense? That's what I feel like this question is directing parents to. Can you change a person's personality? Like, I think there are some things in some people's personalities that are never changeable, right? Like, I am a very loud person. I have always been a loud person. I tried to stifle it for a very long time as a fundamentalist Christian, and I failed very miserably. I can embrace that about myself now. I am a loud person. I know I am not everybody's cup of tea. I know that if I go into the movie theater and I laugh, I am going to embarrass my kids, just like my dad embarrassed me because I get my loudness from my father. And I think that there are some things about a child's personality that you don't have to try to change because it just makes them them. And I think that this question and answer is also setting up that if you don't like something in your child, you can control them out of it. And I think that is part of what excuses and teaches abuse out of these materials. I'd like to know what your thoughts about it. Let me know if you agree with my assessment of this. I mean, so he started this in the 60s, right? Like he was very young. I think he was in his 20s when he started this. And I think he pigeonholed himself into something that he never grew out of and he never grew up and matured out. Let me know if you agree if this was part of the setup of control. This is part of how abuse is excused and taught because none of this stuff was overt, right? It was always so covert because anybody can interpret it differently, right? And that's the thing about the Bible. Like there are so many people who interpret things differently, and sitting there and saying that there is only one way to interpret the Bible and not taking it as something that we can come together and discuss and come to an understanding of without fully I don't know. But like there's only one answer is what he's getting at. And I think that's very dangerous because it makes you not think outside of what you're being taught. And that's where the abuse comes in. And then trying to control somebody's personality that you don't like something in it, super dangerous. And we're talking about children here who are still developing and who have not completely developed and trying to control things out of them that you deem unacceptable. Let's get to the next question. Number 4. Every culture has the right to make up its own standards of morality. Gee, I think I know where this is going. True, false? If false, can you explain? Number 4. False. God has established universal moral standards which no nation can violate without experiencing the resulting consequences. Oh, this is a heavy one. Only because it's setting up Christians to believe that you can legislate morality. And sticking away from politics, like I said, this podcast would do. I would just say that what Bill Gothard is trying to preach again is secular humanism, right? That is his goal. He is trying to combat that secular humanism he believes is wrong. And let me see. I'm going to pull it up here because I think it's important to establish that that's what he said. Basically, the whole basis of his teachings, I believe, in my opinion, that his whole basis was to counteract what he saw as secular humanism and not having God as the center of morality. With that, I have found where he talked about it in his book, and let's talk about it now. So his first question is, how can I protect my family from the destructive influence of humanism? He goes to define humanism as secular humanism excludes God. It makes man his own highest authority. It teaches that man's pleasure or happiness is the highest good. Moral standards are relative in humanism and give way to situational ethics. And then he says that humanism began with Satan tempting Eve in the garden. And there you go. So I wanted to pull up the definition of secular humanism, a form of humanist theory and practice that rejects religious belief as a basis for moral judgment and action. Secular humanism does state that they believe that morals are basically, from what I understand of this definition, is morality does not need to be tied to God. In the eyes of Bill Gothard, that cannot be true. If that is not true, then we need to figure out how to live life by God's standards. For me personally, I have experienced relationships with people who are atheist or non Christian, and I have not seen evidence that those people do not care about humans I would say that a lot of them are a better example of Christianity than any Christians I've met. If you go into this teaching or organization and everything they teach thinking people who do not believe in God are wrong, people who do not believe in God do not have morals, and their morals can change based on circumstances, then this guy presents you with a long list of things of what is moral and what is not, you're more inclined to follow every belief that you're being fed instead of doing the work on your own, researching this stuff on your own, experiencing different relationships with people who differ in thought process and belief and views of the world. It is another isolationist ideology in my opinion. And it's setting up be isolated from these people because they're bad. And if that's the brick you're building on, if that's the foundation that you're building on, that nobody can be moral unless they have God, it goes to that us versus them mentality, right? You set up that whole structure of it's us versus them with that one core belief. And everything that you teach from there on out is based on us versus them. And we are right, they are wrong. Very black and white thinking, which all leads to why I believe this is definitely a cult. It's interesting to look at the stuff after all the work that I've done and seeing things from a different light. Like if I had been going through this 5, 10 years ago, I'm not sure I would see some of the things that I'm seeing now. Look, this is just my opinion, right? This is just my experience. I am open to a discussion about what you think the intent of these materials were, what you think he's trying to teach about secular humanism, and if you agree with me that this is setting up the us versus them mentality, isolationist ideology. So I would really love to hear what your thoughts are on this. So with that, I am going to end this episode. I did decide that I think I'm going to do 3 videos a week. I will publish them Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then what I will also do is compile a couple of these episodes into a podcast. And that way I can also continue the podcast with a bunch of these together and put them in one episode. And that way, if you want to have it in a more longer format instead of the short format, just trying to make some changes and get Umbrella Rebellion doing something because I'm very passionate about this. I would love to make this my full-time job. This is something that I would love to transition into, especially considering the health challenges that I have had recently. So if you are able, please make sure that you are following us, subscribing to us, go look for us on YouTube. We're on all the podcast platforms, Substack, Instagram, Facebook. With Substack, you can purchase a subscription to help support this work. We would appreciate it, but we understand that not everybody is in the position to do that. And that being said, I just want you to know that if somebody has not told you today or ever, I am proud of you.